Welcome, Claw Lords and Demon Princes, to the unseen shadows of the mortal realms, because today we are continuing our discussion on the Skaven faction by jumping into the Verminlords. And I wanted to talk about the Verminlords distinct from the various factions because, as we will see, while each demon of the Great Horned Rat may have attributes that align themselves smoothly with the goals of some of the major clans, they do act as a separate animal. And that allows them to lead on multiple clans of all different kinds of goals and direct the Skaven like pawns on a grander scale. And so some of the highlights of this video is just going to be asking questions like, what does it mean to be a demon of the Great Horned Rat? How do they manifest themselves? What are the goals that they all have, and how do they go about achieving them? We even have two named demons, one of them that was added in this particular battle tome that I want to shine a spotlight on, and so we're going to do all of that in today's video. One thing I like to add right up top though, if you like this video and you're interested in Skaven at all, please consider using the affiliate links in my description down below. Using those links, you'll see exactly how much money you save, and every time you do, it throws a tip in my tip jar at no cost to you, and directly supports me, my wife, the cats, the whole channel, and I'm so thankful for each and every one of you who does. Also, if you want to learn how to play with the Verminlords on the table, I'm sure there's going to be some fantastic tactics articles over on Goonhammer, which is an online blog resource. They have all kinds of content regarding playing the game, model reviews, painting tutorials. If you want to know anything about AOS, I'm sure it's on Goonhammer. Okay, so for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar, or I'm going to say GW lore in general, they have their own kind of like demon mythology that they all work on. We're going to explain this. So while the Verminlords may just look like taller versions of their Skaven brothers, the divide between them is just vast. Verminlords do manifest as giant Skaven with these elaborate twisted horns. Each one of them could be mistaken for being like an avatar of the Great Horned Rat himself. But it's important to remember that these are not mortals, like the rest of the Skaven are. These are demons. And in GW lore style, demons are exceptionally interesting. Essentially, you start with a chaos god, and in order to allow that god to disseminate their will across the mortal realms, they break off smaller portions of their power. They then craft it and give it a crude level of sentience of varying levels. Basically, the rule being you only need to think as much as it takes to get the job done, generally, and then they are released with their god's blessing. These demons can then, if they have the sentience to do so, go on to recruit, manipulate, or bless mortals, make promises, elevate people, and so on. So they become free agents, but they are a direct reflection of some aspect of their god. They're a piece of him. Now, the Great Horned Rat in this respect stands apart from the other Chaos Gods in the sense that he has no lesser demons. Those being smaller demons with little or no independent thought. So like Plague Bearers for Nurgle, Khorne has Bloodletters. He doesn't have any of those kind of foot soldiers with like little to no intelligence. Instead, each piece of him that is broken off to create a Verminlord was molded to be a highly capable and independent force. There are a few stories that include these guys, and they often first just appear to a Claw Lord or a Greyseer as a dark voice giving them orders, but then maybe reveal themselves later as needed. They are often leading multiple clans at once, pointing them towards a single goal or direction, or manipulating whoever they need to, or winnowing out whatever clans stand in their way. It almost feels kind of Zinchi, to be honest with you, the way that the cults operate individually and then maybe they can be guided by a singular great demon, has a lot of that same kind of flair to it. And it's important to remember that there's no hard lines here, right? Keywords, at least in the lore sense, don't really matter. So a Verminlord may appear in person like a black shadow form, but work most with clans Pestilence and Scryer, even though Shadow and Stealth is more tied to Eshin. And so that's why I wanted to talk about them separately, and that's kind of one of the main reasons I really like Verminlords, is that they're technically allowed to synergize with things for a gameplay concession, but lore-wise they operate outside those normal structures. They are independent operatives that are given full authority and resources by the Great Horned Rat to sow madness and destruction into the world. And honestly, these demons are just so much more creative than the normal Skaven around them. But it's important to remember that they keep all the flawed personality traits that define the species. Because remember, the Skaven are a reflection of the Great Horned Rat, and these are pieces of him. They suffer from all the same foibles and weaknesses and backstabbing and politics that all the other Skaven do. The Verminlords just do it amongst themselves. But they do it because that's who the Skaven are, and that's who the Great Horned Rat is. The Verminlords are just those traits magnified in a different way, and I love that. And to that end, let's start talking about them. In terms of Verminlords, and the greater discussion of Great Horned Rat demons, we have a few units. Like I said, 2 named characters, one that was just added. And then there's the Verminlord multi-kit that can be built into a few different options, each reflecting different aspects of the Great Horned Rat. And so we'll tackle the characters first. We'll start with my personal favorite, Screech Vermin King. Now, legend has it, at one point, the Council of 13, meaning the Skavens in charge of everybody, grew so haughty that they sought to somehow usurp the Great Horned Rat himself. Amused by this, the Great Horned Rat scooped up the entire council and basically put them into like a soul prison where they colluded and backstabbed against one another for centuries until eventually they kind of like dissipated and their soul stuff kind of interweaved as they were just left there. From this collection of souls, the sentience that is Screech Vermin King was given life. In what is by far the most gruesome way to achieve cooperation imaginable, because Screech is able to wield the various clans and their politicking as if he were still the members of that original Council of 13. In fact, we mentioned it before, the 13th seat on the council is specifically reserved for him to descend and give the Great Horned Rat's opinion. He sits there, adjudicates if he wants, gives orders, has people work towards a goal. For example, it was Vermin King who introduced and ultimately orchestrated the events of the Skaven Doom. He directed the clan Scryer on the arcane machines that would rip Blight City into the realms. He directed others to poison ley lines, destroy hindrances like you read about in the book. Skaventide, I think is what it's called for this new season. It's all about one of the walls that was a hindrance to the Skaven invasion. It was a big plan, decades in the making, but that's the level he works at, with no time constraints, because again, he's not immortal. We also saw him in the last book of the campaign series that introduced 4th edition. Gunnar Brand was in like the heart of a mountain. Screech Vermin King is there at ground zero for that massive explosion that brought Blight City in. Now the other named character that we get is a new one, and I was so curious to see how he fit into the power structure with Screech Vermin King. But here is the 2+ tough synopsis of the story of Vizek Scour, Prophet of the Horned Rat. Back in the events of the last narrative arc for AOS, a new god was unleashed, named Kragnos. The way that the realm shook when he broke out of his prison, and the accompanying Rite of Life by Alariel, shook up the setting in a big way. It was even felt within the realms of chaos. Specifically in Blight City, a large flame of primordial energy roared up, almost like someone knocked a pipe loose and the demonic energy of the Great Horned Rat was just kind of shooting out wildly. Some Skaven tried to tame it or harness it. They were immediately blown up. Others prayed to it and their throats were slashed, and no one really knew what to do with this thing. It was kind of just sealed off as a section. And it remained that way for some time. Sort of like I kind of see it as like a primordial shard of the Great Horned Rat. He hasn't given it form yet, but it's there. Well, when the events of the Skaven Doom went down, and the Great Horned Rat ascended, he felt a sensation that he liked. Worship. Now, he'd always had worshippers in the form of Clans Pestilens, but I guess in this sense it was a little different. That was a minor sect of Skaven, worshipping the Great Horned Rat as a scourer and plague wielder. This one was all the clans in one chorus, proclaiming the Great Horned Rat as the deity on the level of his enemies like Khorne and Tzeentch. And to revel in this new level of religious piety and significance, the Great Horned Rat looked at that moat of primordial power and poured his desire for reverence into it. He sculpted it into the sentience we now know as Vizek Scour. Essentially, it's a Verminlord who specifically is meant to act as a religious force within Skavendom. Vermin King leads on the back end, making decisions, disseminating plans. Vizek leads at the front, getting even like the lowliest clan rat whipped up into an excited fervor that sees Skaven armies swing above their weight class. He's the Zealot. But it's important to remember that he is just one more Verminlord, which means he has competition. We briefly touched on it in the clan's Verminus video, but at one point there was another Verminlord who wanted to strike down Vizek, down a peg, and basically shut him down. He tried to hire Critic Foulblade to help him. Critic did the mental math, saw that Vizek is a way more powerful Verminlord, and backstabbed his patron. That's how he has a Demon Blade. Point being, Skaven, small and big, see him as a massively powerful enemy and ally within their own faction. But like Vermin King, he has a unique position that operates outside the normal structure, and that allows him to work with any clans, right? Screech's big thing is that he has authority over all of them, whereas I feel like Vizek's thing is he's about Skaven period, and that is a way of circumventing all the clan structures. And so now I want to move into talking about the non-named variant. These are essentially different ways the Great Horned Rat reveals himself. And if you get a model for one, I invite you to name them and write a really cool story for them, because honestly, these tend to be the masterminds of so many Skaven plots and schemes. A lot of times, Claw Lords, Arch Warlocks, whatever, they'll go out in service, often, of a Verminlord who promises them power and riches. First up is the Verminlord Warbringer, and this is essentially like the Skaven general's dream or personification of the Great Horned Rat. These are demons that lead from the front. They're whipping Skaven factions near them or hordes near them into a frenzy, and they're clad in really, really thick metal armor as well as muscle. They look like a giant, storm vermin, just magnified. But what's interesting about them is they are not just brutes. Although they do like being on the battlefield, and they do like punching the enemy in the face, the Warbringer also embodies like the devious tactician mind of like feints and parries and counterattacks that the Skaven really excel at. They're really great at calculating how much to exploit a situation for maximum gain. So they represent a lot of plotting and planning in a military sense off the table, but then when the battle starts, they want to be up in the front. Because of all of that, they're most likely to be seen on the battlefield than compared to all the other Verminlords. They like being seen, and they often oversee the actions of the clan's Verminus, who also respect martial might and power. Next up is the Verminlord Warpseer, and this is the unrivaled masters of magic amongst the Great Horned Rat's children. They have an intrinsic connection to arcane powers, and they're able to see the threads of fate in a way that nobody else can. What this means, practically speaking, is these are oftentimes the puppet masters, right? Raising the standing of a Claw Lord only to discard them once the Warpseer's vision is achieved and they're no longer useful. Upon formation, each one of them is given a scry orb that essentially channels their magic into visions of the future. This gives them an unfair advantage in a lot of combats, and if something should change that fate, however, whatever that might be, and the Warpseer needs to escape, they can hurl that scry orb like a grenade, which is pretty cool. Next is the Verminlord Corruptor. These are the plague-ridden demons that are often seen in the eyes of clans Pestilence as an embodiment of their god. They wield dual plague scythes, and the Corruptor is essentially just a whirlwind of disease and murder on the battlefield. And really what makes him unique is that he's able to spread contagion by his very presence. Like as he's cutting things down, he's infecting everybody on the battlefield. The longer the battle goes on, the more people he's getting sick. And this is just a further embodiment of the disease-carrying nature of rats. Again, it's very obvious that they will work a lot with clans Pestilence, but I do think that they have enough power and like charisma, I guess you could say, to get any clans to work with them, because they look like an icon of the Great Horned Rat. And the last one here is the Verminlord Deceiver. And these really embody Skaven trickery. They're demons that are assassins, basically a lot like clans Eshin, and they are masters of illusion, ambush, and everything sneaky. Now, oftentimes, a Verminlord Deceiver will stay off the battlefield because they often see fighting as unsubtle. They are still Skaven though, so it's hard to resist coming in for that killing blow and stealing all the credit, so that's oftentimes why you see them. But that said, they will often lead other clans, into battles and stuff like that, or kind of coordinate Skaven to attack at the same time for the distinct purpose of distracting the enemy so that the deceiver himself can go in through a breach and make whatever kill needs to happen. And so I want to end this video like I end all of them by simply asking the question, why is this cool? Well, the Verminlords represent like an escalation or a magnification of what the Skaven are. Each one is a unique brand of terror, and I love the fact that they're written in such a way to be able to pull disparate forces together into a single direction. So if you buy a Verminlord model, that is your license to do whatever you want thematically with your Skaven, basically. Because if they have their own opinion of how to get something done, the army beneath them, or clans beneath them, will reflect that. I find myself being very torn between wanting lesser demons and loving that the Great Horned Rat is unique in not having any. I don't know, maybe if there was something like Fleshhounds where it's kind of a beast representation, like if there were like, I don't know, crazy pack rats or something like that, demon rats. I don't think I would want any Skaven-sized demons, like I want to use Skaven instead. I'm torn. Let me know, what do you think? Now, my favorite of the non-named Verminlords definitely is the Warbringer. I love the plated armor. I love the idea that he wants to be seen up there punching people in the face. Like, I don't know why, I'm just intrinsically drawn to heroes that want to fight. It's just pure hammer. Right, those heroes who are like, I'm not here to help the rest of the army. I got your force multipliers right here, and then it kisses each one of its fists. Like, that's what I like. I would love to know what your favorite of the Verminlords was. As far as the characters go, like I said, Screech Vermin King is still my man, but I did like the way that they brought Vizek Scour into stuff. They not only introduced a new character with a kind of a anecdote regarding how he was formed, but also then bringing him further in by having him have a story that's tied with Critic Foulblade, another new character. It just makes them feel like they fit in the book more. Like they're active characters, they have a story, they're interwoven. I appreciate that quite a bit. I think it's one of the better jobs at introducing, a big character. Because if you don't know, Vizek Scour, he's a Verminlord. He's the same size. I thought his model was going to be closer to like the Brood Horror or whatever it's called. But no, he's big. So anyway, I thought it was a fantastic introduction to that character and some nice spice to his backstory. Let me know your thoughts on the Verminlords in the comments down below, and I will see you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.